Police and Prison Civil Rights Union say they are troubled by the increase in police killings in the country. POPCRU said the number of police officers killed since the beginning of 2023 stood at 13, while several officials suffered career-threatening injuries or were left disabled. Now an NPO that provides critical medical training and equipment to our law enforcement officers wants to ensure that each officer out there has a special medical kit that could save the life of another officer or even their own. To speak more on this, we are joined by Tim Flack, the CEO of Officer Down. Tim, good afternoon to you. Great to speak to you. Talk to us about the alarming number of police fatalities and obviously what's urged you to come up with this life-saving solution.
Hi, Hugo. Thanks for having me on the show, and hi to the viewers. Basically, the amount of police officers that are dying on duty in dangerous circumstances in South Africa is becoming out of hand and out of control. We're seeing more and more officers being attacked on duty and dying because of providing safety and security to members of the South African public. And what happened was last year there was a young officer killed in Grassy Park, and it was at a specific time of day when there was shift change happening. It was peak traffic, and medical services and police services couldn't get to him fast enough in order to provide quality and fast tactical casualty care to him. So I came up with the idea of Officer Down, and together with my two other directors, Karen Gamage and Temba Kubeka, we decided that we were going to put an MTO together that provides something that's used around the world by law enforcement and military throughout the world, and South Africa seems to be lacking. And something as simple as a tourniquet that can stop mass bleeding is enough to save life. So what we did was we put something together called an IFAC. It's an individual first aid kit. This is a standard throughout the entire world, and what it does is that it provides individual first aid to yourself and buddy first aid if your buddy is out of action. You can use tools like a tourniquet, chest seals to stop bleeding if you've been shot in the chest. The tourniquet stops heavy bleeding, clotting gauze to stop hemorrhage, and ways to stop you from getting something called a pneumothorax, to stop your lungs from collapsing. All these sort of things were used by the US military during the Iraqi war, and casualties were reduced down to 2.1% because of this, just a simple kit that you can carry on your belt. So Officer Down is there to provide this kind of kit to officers for free. There's no government involved. We rely solely on funding from individuals and the public, and we provide this service for free to officers and the training as well. Obviously,
sounds absolutely incredible. Let's talk about how has it been received by the police.
It hasn't really been received all that well. We've been trying to break into the South African market, and we've just carried on. And I've been going out and helping individual police officers. We're at the stage where we're trying to look for funding, but unfortunately in South Africa the police and law enforcement aren't seen as a positive thing. Unfortunately, so not very many people are willing to step out and help. But we're hoping that we can change that, because if officers are feeling safe and are able to save their own lives, it'll mean obviously a better service for everyone else out in South Africa.
So what is the cost of one of these IFACs?
So an IFAC for one individual police officer, just the basic IFAC, they'll obviously have to buy a regulation bag that they can fit onto their belt. But the IFAC itself, we charge between 650 and 800 Rand. And that lasts until you need it.
So it's used just once off?
Yeah, it's just once off, and then the service that we provide, obviously, if an officer does have to use a tourniquet to save him, to save a life, then they can contact us, and we've got them on the system. We can just provide them with another tourniquet or another item in the kit to replenish it.
So it sounds like a marvelous idea, but is the cost not prohibitive for those that are wanting to support the police, and certainly for the police themselves? Because I'd imagine that Becky Cele, who's a Minister of Police, is not too keen on officers dying on duty, especially if IFAC or any other tool might be able to assist them. But the question then arises that if you've got a couple of 100,000 police officers, that cost becomes astronomical. Is there a way of subsidizing or bringing that cost down?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. The cost is quite high, and that's why we probably haven't seen the government implement these sort of tools for officers and purchasing these kits. The other concern from our side is obviously procurement corruption that gets involved, that we see so much that happens in government, and that's why we want to take this to the public and take this to corporations, because saving the life of a police officer is a good thing. There are ways to mitigate the costs and bring things down, but for example, the tourniquet that I have here in my hand is a specific kind. It's a cat tourniquet. Internationally, all around the world, they are quite expensive on their own. So the equipment, we'd have to partner with medical companies and with the manufacturers of these things and say, look, this is something that we're going to be doing on a regular basis. There's going to be a lot of orders coming in. Is there a way that we can mitigate this? Can they sponsor us, or can we come to a deal? And that's why we registered an NPO, and we're planning on pushing to become a public benefit organization as well, so that tax certificates can be issued and that sort of stuff. That also helps the companies that help us as well.
Are these kits manufactured locally?
There are some kits that are manufactured locally. There's a lot of companies that do import the stuff. The shooting community in South Africa is quite large, and they've cottoned onto the concept of tactical casualty combat care for quite a few years now. So there are companies that do bring it in, and there are some local companies that do manufacture some of the equipment. So it is relatively easy to get hold of. It would just be a matter of partnering up with the major companies that sort of have all the equipment all together at the same time.
So I was speaking specifically to the product that you've created. Are the various components that make it up for you, do you manufacture those locally?
Unfortunately not. Cat tourniquets are made in the United States of America. I think the stamp on it says that it's made in the USA. And these were specifically developed for the US military, and I think they've got this sort of monopoly on the manufacture of it. There are various different kinds of tourniquets that you can buy. We prefer this specifically because it is so successfully used. But having companies manufacturing this kind of stuff locally would be great. I mean, we would do it ourselves, but obviously funding to get off the ground and stuff like that has been slightly challenging. But we're hoping with more media exposure and more getting more media out there, we can bring in more funding and be able to provide these things at a cheaper price. But the whole point is that the police officer doesn't have to pay for this themselves.
Tim, I'd imagine that you've done a fair amount of research and finding out what the situation is with police officers in the event that they are shot or injured on duty. Now, just how much first aid training or CPR related training do they have, and capacity, for instance, to deal or administer IFAC?
So in South Africa, the police, law enforcement, and the SANDF, they don't offer the system of tactical combat casualty care as a standard, or as a unit standard. We're not taught these things. In the military, they have to wait for a medic to get there, and the police have zero training in this kind of stuff. I think they would maybe have basic first aid, but in terms of this sort of life-changing system that's been developed, there's zero training in it.
So are you suggesting that if a police officer is shot or has an accident in the course of their duty, their partners aren't able to offer any form of support until the medics arrive?
Yes, that's it. And they would know the basics, so they would probably put pressure on a wound. If someone, say for example, if someone is shot in the chest, and they would put pressure on the wound, but sometimes the standard, if someone stops breathing, would be to start doing chest compressions for CPR. They would try that, but when you've got a hole in your chest and air is getting sucked into your chest cavity, you're compressing your lungs to the point where you actually suffocate. So a lot of people wouldn't know this off the bat unless they were trained to use it. Whereas something as simple as a chest seal, the moment you're shot in the chest and the situation is clear, putting a chest seal on that wound itself is enough to let the air that's already inside out and stop additional air from getting in. Therefore, you're buying that precious time for an ambulance to get to you.
And just a final question. What would be the benefit of every police officer having an IFAC kit? I mean, when we talk about motivation and morale within the police force.
Yes. Yeah, the benefits are the fact that they get to go home to their families at the end of the day. That in the line of duty, they are constantly in very dangerous situations, and the idea that if they do get shot or they do get stabbed, that they have a means to save their own lives and buy precious time for emergency services to get there. Those precious seconds count. So if you get shot or stabbed in a femoral artery, you can bleed out in a matter of a minute. And having a tourniquet, for example, putting it on your leg, tightening it up. There's countless videos on YouTube. People can go and have a look and what the benefits of having a tourniquet is. Having a tourniquet, if you've got a femoral artery bleed, will most definitely save your life. If you put it on, tighten it up, you're not going to bleed to death. Which is fantastic, and I mean this gives them peace of mind. Yes, no one likes the idea of having been shot or stabbed or have terrible bleeding, but the idea that you can save your own life or that you can save the life of your buddy or your colleague on duty is very beneficial.
Tim Flack, CEO of Officer Down, appreciate your time this afternoon on Newsfeed.